You're probably watching this on your phone. And that's not a coincidence, because the same device you're using to relax, to learn, to escape for a few minutes is quietly charging you rent. Not in one big, obvious bill, not in a way that sets off alarm bells, but in tiny, forgettable amounts that feel harmless. $1 here, $2 there, a little convenience fee you didn't even notice because, honestly, you were tired, hungry, or just didn't want to think. Here's the thing. Most people think they're bad with money because they're irresponsible or lazy or just not disciplined enough. That's not what's happening. What's actually happening is much more uncomfortable. Your phone didn't just make life easier. It changed how money leaves your life. Before smartphones, spending money required effort. You had to walk somewhere, you had to wait, you had to hand over cash or at least see the total before paying. Now, spending money feels like tapping glass. No friction, no pause, no moment where your brain goes, "Hey, is this worth it?" And that tiny change rewired everything. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but come on, my phone isn't stealing from me. I'm choosing to spend. That's fair. It feels like a choice. But behavioral economists have a word for this kind of system. It's called choice architecture. And modern apps are designed to make the expensive option feel like the easiest option, while the cheap option feels annoying. That's not accidental. Because when spending becomes effortless, you stop tracking it emotionally. And when you stop feeling money leave, it leaves faster. A lot faster. In fact, when you add it all up, subscriptions, delivery fees, impulse buys, convenience charges, the average person is quietly losing about $18,240 over a decade. Not on luxury, not on vacations, but on tiny decisions that never felt like decisions. And the scariest part? There's usually one moment where it all starts. One small choice that feels insignificant at the time. A choice that costs about $1.39. And once you see that moment clearly, you'll never look at your phone the same way again. Because next, we need to talk about how your phone stopped being a tool and quietly became a toll booth. Let's rewind for a second. Not to some ancient time, just far enough back that spending money still had weight. If you wanted food, you left your house. If you wanted a movie, you went to a theater. If you wanted something random, you waited until the weekend and went to a store. Every transaction came with friction, and friction is important because friction is where your brain wakes up. It asks annoying questions like, do I really need this? Is this worth the effort? Can this wait? Now here's the invisible shift nobody noticed. Your phone didn't remove money, it removed friction. And when friction disappears, spending doesn't feel like spending anymore. It feels like access. Access to food, access to entertainment, access to comfort, access to relief. That's a huge psychological change because humans are terrible at measuring small costs over time, but we're amazing at justifying convenience in the moment. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but convenience is good, I save time. And you're right, you do save time. But here's the trade nobody explained. You're not paying with money anymore. You're paying with unnoticed money. Your phone became the middleman between you and your life. And middlemen don't work for free. Think about it. Almost every major app you use sits between you and something you already wanted. Food, transport, entertainment, social connection, productivity. They didn't invent those needs. They monetized the path to them. And the more invisible the payment feels, the more powerful the system becomes. This is why the most profitable features are never the expensive ones. They're the cheap ones. The $1.39 upgrade, the just this once delivery fee, the 7-day free trial that quietly rolls over. Because once you say yes to a tiny amount, you've trained your brain to stop asking permission. That's the moment. That's the $1.39 decision. Not because it's expensive, but because it teaches your brain that spending through your phone doesn't hurt. And once spending stops hurting, it accelerates. But we still haven't hit the most dangerous part yet, because the real damage doesn't come from one big purchase. It comes from something much quieter, much more patient: subscriptions. And once your money starts leaving your life automatically, that's when things get really hard to control.
Subscriptions are brilliant. Not for you, for the companies charging you. Because subscriptions solve the biggest problem businesses have always had: getting you to pay without thinking about it. Here's the thing. Your brain is wired to feel pain when money leaves your hands. That pain is useful. It's a warning system. Subscriptions bypass that system completely. Once you say yes the first time, the money doesn't feel like it's leaving anymore. It just disappears. Now, you might be thinking, but it's only a few dollars a month. That's nothing. And that's exactly why it works. $10 doesn't feel like $10 when it's monthly. It feels like a rounding error, like background noise. But your bank account doesn't experience money monthly, it experiences it cumulatively. Let's break this down. One streaming service turns into 3. One cloud storage upgrade turns into 2. A music app, a productivity tool, a fitness app you stopped opening, a free trial you meant to cancel. Individually, they feel harmless. Together, they become a silent paycheck siphon. And the most dangerous part? Subscriptions are opt-out, not opt-in, meaning the default is you keep paying. Default settings are incredibly powerful. Most people never change them. In behavioral economics, this is called status quo bias. We stick with whatever requires the least effort. So companies design subscriptions to require no effort to continue and maximum effort to stop. Cancel buttons buried 3 menus deep, confusing wording, a final screen that says, "Are you sure you'll lose all your data?" That's not customer care, that's psychological friction used against you. And over time, something weird happens. You stop mentally counting subscriptions as spending. They become fixed, like rent or utilities. Except rent gives you shelter. Utilities give you heat and water. Many subscriptions give you guilt. Guilt for not using them. Guilt for forgetting to cancel. Guilt that quietly keeps you from looking too closely. And this is where the number starts growing. Because subscriptions don't just cost money, they train you to tolerate slow leaks. And once your brain accepts slow leaks, it becomes vulnerable to the next layer. Because subscriptions are predictable. The real money extractor is unpredictable. Food delivery, ride apps, just tonight convenience. And that's where things really start to add up.
Food delivery might be the most honest example of how your phone makes spending feel fake. Because when you think about ordering food, you don't think about money first. You think about relief. Relief from cooking, relief from deciding, relief from effort. And that emotional relief is exactly what the app is selling. Here's what makes delivery apps so dangerous. They don't charge you one obvious price. They charge you 5 small ones: a delivery fee, a service fee, a small order fee, a temporary fee, and then a tip, which now feels mandatory. Individually, each one looks reasonable. Together, they quietly double the cost of the meal. But your brain doesn't process them together because the total doesn't feel like one big loss. It feels like a series of tolerable annoyances. And there's something else happening here: timing. You usually order delivery when you're tired, stressed, or hungry, which is when your self-control is at its weakest. That's not a coincidence either. Studies show that decision quality drops dramatically when blood sugar is low or mental energy is depleted. In simple terms, hungry brains are bad with money. So the app shows up at the exact moment you're least likely to care. Now you might say, okay, but I don't order that often. Fair, but here's the math trap. If delivery adds, let's say, $12 in extra fees and tips, and you order just twice a week, that's almost $100 a month. Over a year, that's more than $1,000. And that's just food. Ride-sharing works the same way. So does instant grocery delivery. So does same-day shipping. Each one replaces a little effort with a little money. And because effort is invisible in bank statements, you never notice how much you're paying to avoid it. This is why people feel broke even when they don't buy anything expensive. They're not bleeding from one big wound. They're leaking from dozens of tiny cuts. But even now, we still haven't explained the $18,240 because the biggest damage isn't what you spend. It's what that spending never becomes. And this is where the math stops being annoying and starts being scary.
All right, this is the part most people try to skip, because once you see the math clearly, you can't unsee it. And it changes how every small decision feels. So let's do this slowly. No spreadsheets, no financial jargon, just reality. Let's start with something that feels harmless. Say your phone-based convenience costs you $5 a day. Not all at once, not consciously. Maybe it's a delivery fee instead of cooking. Maybe it's an in-app purchase. Maybe it's an upgrade, a tip, a why not moment. $5 doesn't feel like a problem. It feels invisible. But $5 a day is about $150 a month. Now pause for a second and ask yourself honestly, does that number already feel uncomfortable? Because we're just getting started. $150 a month is $1,800 a year. Still not terrifying, still feels manageable. But here's where the math quietly turns against you. Most people don't lose this money for 1 year. They lose it for a decade, 10 years. That's $18,000. And that's before inflation, before price increases, before apps get more aggressive with fees. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that's worst case. I'm not spending $5 every day. Fair. But here's the catch. You don't need to spend $5 every day. Some days it's 0. Other days it's 20. Your brain averages it down. Your bank account doesn't. And here's the part nobody talks about. It's not just the money you lose, it's what that money never becomes. Imagine that same $150 a month invested instead. Not aggressively, not in some risky fantasy, just modest growth. Over 10 years, that $180,000 could quietly become $25,000, $30,000, more depending on returns. So the real cost isn't $18,240, it's the future that money could have built. A safety buffer, options, time. Instead, it evaporated into convenience you barely remember. This is why the number feels so unsettling, because when you think back, you can't point to anything concrete and say, that's where it went. No memories, no assets, no milestone, just gone. And this is the moment where people usually turn inward and blame themselves. They say, I should have more discipline. I should just try harder. I need better habits. But that misses the real problem, because this isn't a discipline failure. It's a psychological mismatch. Your brain evolved to handle rare, painful spending decisions, not constant, painless ones. And modern apps exploit that gap perfectly. Which brings us to the most important question of all. If this is happening to smart, aware people, why doesn't willpower fix it?
If willpower worked, this wouldn't be a problem. You already know that ordering in is more expensive. You already know subscriptions add up. You already know convenience costs money. And yet, here we are. That's not a personal failure. That's a design mismatch. Your brain didn't evolve for this environment. It evolved for a world where spending was rare, physical, and painful. You handed something over, you felt the loss, you remembered it. Modern apps remove every one of those signals. There's no physical exchange, no waiting, no visible consequence, just a button that says confirm, and your brain treats that very differently. There's something called payment decoupling. It means the moment you enjoy something is separated from the moment you pay for it. When those two moments drift apart, spending skyrockets. This is why credit cards beat cash, why subscriptions beat one-time purchases, why tapping beats typing, and apps stack these advantages on top of each other. But here's the most dangerous part: dopamine. Every time you order food, unlock content, or get something instantly, your brain gets a small reward. Not a big one, just enough to feel good. And because the reward is variable, your brain stays hooked. Sometimes it feels amazing, sometimes it's just okay, but you never know which one you'll get. That uncertainty keeps you coming back. This is the same mechanism used in slot machines. Different context, same wiring. And then there's default bias. If something is set up to continue automatically,
Your brain assumes it's the correct choice. Canceling requires effort. Effort feels like loss, so you avoid it, which is why so many people say, "I've been meaning to cancel that." Meaning to, but not doing, because intention isn't enough when the system is stacked against action. This is why advice like just track your spending or be more mindful doesn't work. You're asking a Stone Age brain to fight a modern, optimized system. That's not fair, and it's not effective. So what actually works? Not deleting your phone, not living like a monk, not trying to be perfect. The real solution is much quieter. You don't need more discipline, you need friction. And once you understand how to add friction back, strategically, intentionally, the whole game changes.
Here's the mistake most people make. They hear all of this, they get motivated for about 3 days, and then they try to go nuclear. Delete every app, cancel everything, promise themselves they'll never order food again. That always fails. Not because you're weak, but because extremes don't survive real life. The goal isn't to remove convenience, it's to put it back behind a gate. Remember, apps win because they're frictionless. So the fix is simple, but uncomfortable at first. You make spending slightly annoying again. Not painful, just annoying enough that your brain wakes up. Let me show you what that actually looks like. First change, remove saved payment methods from your phone, not from your bank, from the apps. The extra 20 seconds of typing your card number feels small, but psychologically it's huge. It recouples payment with action. Your brain goes from tap and forget to wait, do I want this? Second change, turn subscriptions into manual renewals wherever possible. If an app doesn't offer that, ask yourself why. And if canceling feels emotionally hard, that's a signal, not a reason to keep it. Third change, create a rule for convenience spending. Not never, never doesn't work. Something like, I only order delivery on weekends, or I only use ride apps after 9 p.m., or I can have convenience but not urgency. Rules beat willpower because rules remove negotiation. Fourth change, delay upgrades by 48 hours. Most impulse upgrades die in silence if you give them time, and the ones that survive, those are the ones you actually value. This isn't about deprivation, it's about forcing the question back into the moment. Because the phone's entire strategy is to prevent you from asking that question. Once you add friction, something surprising happens. You don't feel restricted, you feel calmer. Because money stops leaking in places you can't see. And that's when your finances start feeling more quieter, more predictable, more controlled. Which leads to the final realization. Your phone isn't evil, but it is not neutral. And understanding that changes everything. Here's the reframe I want you to sit with. Your phone isn't stealing from you. It's charging you for convenience by default. And defaults are powerful because most people never question them. But once you do, once you see where the money actually goes, the spell breaks. You stop feeling bad with money and start seeing the system clearly. That feeling of always being behind, that quiet anxiety about the future, a lot of it isn't income, it's invisible outflow. Money leaving your life so smoothly you never felt it. The goal isn't to hate your phone. The goal is to make it work for you again, to turn it back into a tool, not a toll booth. Because the moment spending requires intention again, you regain control without trying harder. And the next time you tap your screen and hesitate for half a second, that's not inconvenience, that's awareness. And awareness is expensive for companies, but incredibly profitable for you. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That means you're paying attention. And once you start paying attention, your money finally starts staying where it belongs.